everyone. Today I will be introducing Veronika Mühlhofer, a TASIS alumni that graduated in 1997. Currently, she is the Venue Press Operations Manager for Paris 2024. Veronika Mühlhofer has more than 2 decades of experience in international sports and event management, including 7 Olympic Games and countless world and European championships in several sports. She has lived, worked, and studied in the US, Europe, Asia, South America, and Russia, and speaks 6 languages. She is also an entrepreneur who owns the event management company Million Sports. Veronika is a World Rugby Level 3 coach, an educator, and is on the board of Rugby Europe, and chairs its Audit and Risk Committee. She also serves on the Council of the World Rugby, where she represents Rugby Europe and its 46 member unions. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Mühlhofer, and I'm passing on the microphone to you.
Thank you very much, Nina. That was an amazing introduction. You made me sound really good, so thank you very much. Hi, everybody. I'm Veronika Mühlhofer, and thank you so much to Dr. Chris Love and to TASIS for inviting me to be here and to speak to you guys. I got to meet a few students already in a few classes today. I got to speak right here to the middle school group, which was a fun experience earlier today. And so I'm excited to speak to you. As Dr. Love said, I graduated from TASIS 26 years ago. I just had to calculate this morning how many years it's been. And that does seem like a long time ago. It is a long time ago, but when I was, so back then I was in your seats. Well, actually not in these seats because this whole building didn't exist. And our theater was a small little room above Hatzel, but, or a small little hall. But anyway, the campus has come a long way since. But when I was in your shoes, I was getting ready or getting anxious to start the next chapter in my journey, which is what you guys are about to do as the class of 2023, when you will graduate later this year. So when you will embark, as you get ready to embark on your journey, I hope to be able to give you, tell you my story, tell you a few things, give you a few tips that hopefully will be relatable. So as Nina already said, I currently work for the Olympic Games. And so I want to start off with a little video, that's the trailer for the Paris Olympics, just to give you a taste of it. So that's just a little trailer they made to give a taste of the games. Let me start with a little question here to everyone. Does anyone here know what they want to do or what they want to be when they grow up? Does anyone, just show of hands? Does anyone know? Yeah, okay, a few people. All right, that's pretty good. Almost all the middle schoolers did know what they want to be, and they had pretty fascinating ideas. But I didn't when I was a senior at TASIS. I had no idea what I wanted to do when I grow up. Now I think I have it partway figured out. Still some things to work on, but I had no idea what I wanted to be when I grow up. But my story is one about finding your passion and following it and see what comes of it. This photo over here, that's my graduation in June of 1997. Graduation used to be held just outside on that grassy hill where when you come in past the gazebo. If it didn't rain, if it rained, it used to be held in the old gym, which was a temporary building called the Bubble, because the Palestra didn't exist at the time. That's Mrs. Fleming over there, whom I'm sure you've heard about. And that's me giving the valedictorian address to the class of 1997. I went to TASIS for 6 years, from 7th through 12th grade. Back then, TASIS was only 7th through 12th grade, so I went for the whole TASIS experience that existed at the time. I also have two brothers. They both went to TASIS for the duration. One's younger, his name is Toby, and one's older, and his name is Matthias, and he also now sits on the board of TASIS. 26 years ago, I graduated from TASIS, and back then I had no idea what I wanted to do when I grew up. Now, I work for the Paris 2024 Olympics. If you go to the next slide, those aren't the first Olympics I'm working for. I've worked for 8 Olympic Games, and I've worked for many different sport events. I've now worked in sports for almost 23 years. So that's what I do, or as my brothers would say, I've never had a real job. Of course, that's a joke. They never said that, but they could have said that, and my brothers now are a professor, and Matthias is a lawyer by education, but he actually runs the family company. But in a way, there's some truth to it, because I'm lucky enough to never have had what people would consider a real job. And I think, in part, that's also, I think, why Dr. Krislov invited me to come, because I do something a little bit unusual that might not be a profession that everyone knows about or has heard about. So as you can see here, I've worked for a number of Olympic Games. I've also, as Nina already said, I work with World Rugby, which is the International Federation of Rugby. I work with Rugby Europe. I used to work for the International Ice Hockey Federation. I used to be the CEO of Swiss Rugby. And I've worked for a whole number of other events, including the Tropical Sevens Rugby, which is a youth rugby tournament in Florida with 130 kids rugby teams, participation event. I work with Equal Playing Field, which is a company or an organization, actually a nonprofit, that's engaged in activities to improve gender equity in the field of sports. I work with CIS delivering education development programs for the FIFA. I've worked with the FIS for skiing, and my own company is Million Sports. It's a consultancy in sports. So if you go on to the next slide, maybe a little bit more about my background. Go on. My story is really one international. If you go to the next slide, it's an international story. So when I tell my background, it's really about different parts of the world. I was born in Vienna, Austria. My whole family was born there. I grew up actually in Lugano, Switzerland. We moved here when I was 7. So back then, TASIS didn't have an elementary school, so I went to local elementary school. And then I came to TASIS in 7th grade. In TASIS, I loved a lot of things about TASIS. I really did. And one of the things I really loved was sports. I played sports in TASIS. I played on the soccer team. I played basketball, and I played a little bit of tennis, but I was not that great at tennis. Does anyone here play any sports? Yes? Yeah, a few of you. You play for TASIS? Or, yeah? Cool, that's great. So I see a few people here like sports, just the way I did. When I was at TASIS, of course, as you probably have, there was a college counselor, and I went through the college application process. I guess you guys probably have just completed that recently, right? I'm probably getting the first answers, first replies, acceptances, rejections, that sort of thing. So what we used to do when I was a senior, one of the dining rooms was kind of unofficially the senior dining room. That's where we always sat, kind of one in the corner and nobly. And then we, in the spring or end of winter and spring of our senior, when we started getting acceptance and rejection letters, we decided everyone was going to post up on the walls our rejection letters of any colleges we didn't get in. Of course, we were super happy for each other for any colleges we did get in, but we said, if you tried and got rejected, there's no shame to that. So we posted those up on the walls. I'd like to think I was the winner because I had a rejection letter from Harvard. I did get into Stanford, Yale, Princeton, and Berkeley, but the one to post on the wall was the rejection letter from Harvard. That was kind of the spirit of our group, of our senior class back then. So yeah, I applied to a few universities, even though my family was from Europe, and my older brother had gone to University in Vienna, which is a really good university. But Mr. Carr at the time was the college counselor, and he said, well, you're here, you're taking the SATs, you're taking APs, why don't you try to apply? So I applied to those 5 schools I mentioned and got rejected by Harvard and got into the rest. And so then I was like, oh, wow, now what do I do? So the toughest thing is actually having a choice. It's much easier when you don't have a choice. So then I had to decide what I wanted to do, and I was lucky enough that my parents said, we will support you in any decision you make. And so I said, well, it might be cool to be the first one in my family to go study in the United States. And so I was really torn between Princeton and Stanford. I'd had a chance to visit the campuses and really loved both of those. And then on kind of a whim, I decided I should go to Stanford. And that was a hugely important and great decision for me because it was really a great fit. So that's how my story then continues in California, where I ended up living for 6 years. I spent 4 years at Stanford. I did a bachelor and a master's degree in that time. Bachelor's degree was in economics, and the master's was in sociology. And I also played sports at Stanford. As I said, I was playing soccer, football at TASIS, and then when I got to Stanford, they had a really high-level soccer program, which, as some of you know, collegiate sports, when you're playing on a high-level varsity team, it's almost like being a professional athlete. All you can do is practice, play, and do your schooling, and there's very little time for anything else. But I thought if I'm going to go not halfway, but nearly halfway around the world, to a new country, to a new place, I want to experience more than just playing soccer and studying. So I decided not to even try out for the soccer team. It's not sure that I would have gotten a spot, but I decided not to even go for that. And then I tried a new sport, which was rugby. And I ended up playing rugby for 20 years. Also, as you saw, I worked in rugby. I coached rugby. And I don't know do any of you know rugby? Do any of you like rugby? Anyone here? Yeah. No? Not too much? Yeah, a little bit? Yeah. All right, I know certainly any people with a British background always know rugby or love rugby. Yeah, it's a pretty big sport. There's actually the Rugby World Cup is coming up later this year in France in October and November. So that then took me to California, where I was playing sports and did my studies. So then if you go to the next slide, still at that time, I still didn't really know what I wanted to do. So towards the end of college, before my graduation, I had dinner with my parents, and we sat down, and they were like, so, what would you like to do after you graduate? That kind of conversation. And I was like, yeah, I'm not sure, I don't know. I'm going to apply for some jobs, see what happens. I'll probably try and stay in California for a little bit, and then eventually maybe come back to Europe. And nowadays this would be so obvious, but at that time I couldn't see it. In a way, I couldn't see the forest for the trees. But it was my father who said, well, why don't you try working in sports? When here I had loved sports all my life, I'd played sports, I'd even started working a little bit on the side in sports. Those of you who know American universities, American colleges, you know they have really big, like American football stadia. Stanford had a really big basketball arena. Any matches days are big events there, so I was working with the Stanford Athletic Department already on the side, organizing some events, managing some teams, and yet it hadn't occurred to me that this thing I've been doing and loving my whole life could actually be my job and my career. So whether it is sports or something else, I think really the story is about finding your passion and following it. So if you go to the next slide. In my case, my passion was sports. For some of you, that might be it, and some of you might have different ones. The middle schoolers today, they listed all kinds of different fun things that they love, that they're passionate about. So I bet, and I know you guys also have some. And some more might get added to that as you go along. Just gonna make sure I stay on time here. So yeah, as I said, I'd always been doing that, doing sports throughout my youth and schooling. The other things I really loved were, of course, learning languages, traveling, discovering people and cultures of the world. Well, as you all know, as I know, in TASIS, that's what we do. That's what we do every day. We live together with people from all over the world. That's our everyday life, and that's something that's really unusual, and that's something you should feel very proud of, because for the rest of the world, that's not that obvious. But it was something I learned in TASIS and something I really loved and something I wanted to continue. So actually, this challenge of finding a passion and then turning it into a career, well, the pivotal moment, as I told you, was, you know, kind of having that dinner with my parents, and then they said, well, why don't you try to go for that, to turn your passion into kind of your life and your career. And so, okay, now you've identified your passion, you decided you're going to try and go for it. Now what? How does it work? I didn't know how you would work in sports. Like, obviously I could see professional athletes on TV, and they are obviously working in sports, at least for a number of years, but I didn't want and probably didn't have the talent to be a professional athlete. So what's the way forward? So if you go to the next slide, there's a number of ways to prepare yourself to pursue your passion or whatever love or career you decide to pursue. In my case, it was in sports. For all of you, it might be something different. So on one side is, of course, your background and your education. So as I said, I went to TASIS, I went to Stanford, and then when I decided really to go for that as a career, after a couple of years of work experience, I decided to take a master's in sports management, just to formalize my background and my education in that field. First work experiences, like I said, was in college, kind of working on the side for some events, and then I just kind of went for it and applied to work for my first Olympic Games. That was in 2004, for the Olympics in 2006, which were the Winter Games taking place in Torino, Italy. That was after I did my master's degree in sports management. Sometimes you just kind of have to take the plunge and go for it. And a big part of me was thinking, certainly they're not waiting for me, who's never done anything like that, who doesn't know anything about that, to come and apply for a job. But actually they were. They were waiting for all kinds of people. And then I did it, I went for it, and I got lucky and got into the games. Also, of course, I tried to build up my knowledge beforehand and through doing different jobs and work experiences. I did a lot of research. I sought advice and mentoring from people who knew what they were doing. Of course, you have reading of seminars. Nowadays, you have podcasts. Back then, those didn't exist. It was more like books and articles. Anyways, those are all ways you can prepare to follow a career that's your passion, or whatever career it is you decide to follow. And then, of course, as always, it's human relations. Building, not burning bridges, having contacts, trying to build a network with employers or clients, in my case, and all of that. But that's, of course, something natural. Go on to the next slide. So, for anybody who would be interested in working in sports, here's a few types of careers that might not seem obvious, but that one can pursue in the world of sports. Go on. So, first one starting up top on the left, it's on the so-called field of play, and that could be an actual soccer field, that could be the basketball court, that could be on the ski slope, or whatever it is. As we said before, you could be a professional athlete. One could be a coach. I did some coaching in my career. I coached some rugby teams. Of course, there's also a lot of professions in the medical field in sports. Then going on, there's the whole business side of sports. One could be an athlete's agent. You could work in marketing or advertising, in sponsoring, in consultancy and entrepreneurship, like I've done for a while, and I still do with my company. Then there's the media side. That's what I do currently for the Olympics. As you can imagine, there is 20,000, 30,000, maybe if it's a big stadium, 60,000 people sitting in the stadium watching it, but there's millions and even billions watching a big sporting event like the Olympics from home. And how do they watch it? They watch it on their TV, on their laptop, on their phone. They watch it through the media. They might read stories about their favorite athletes on the internet or in a newspaper or things like that. They might listen to podcasts, watch clips, and all that. So what I do currently at the Paris Olympics, with my team, of course, with a whole team of people, we organize the facilities and the logistics to make sure that the media can come and do their work to tell the story of the games to the world, watching from home or from wherever they are. Then if we go down on this side, of course, sporting events, like I work for the Olympics, there's lots of World Cups, championships, there's leagues, there's mass participation events, and tons of others that you can work in and that are fun, and they take place all over the world, and that's a great way of working in sports. Then there's the side of governing bodies. Like we said before, I used to work, I do work with Rugby Europe. I'm on their board. I work with the International Rugby Federation, which is World Rugby, which is like the FIFA of rugby. And I used to work for the International Ice Hockey Federation. So there's a whole world of governing bodies. And then there's the side of nonprofits and NGOs. Many people, me included, still believe that sport has a greater power than just entertaining us or being what we love. It really has a power to bring people together. And it has certain powers for development and to bring hope. And there's tons of organizations out there that are nonprofits and NGOs, non-governmental organizations that do that develop programs to work with sport, to bring peace or to bring hope. A friend of mine works for an organization. They run soccer camps for kids from Israel and Palestine to play in soccer camps together. And as you know, there's a big kind of feud, bad blood between Israelis and Palestinian people and families. And then these kids play soccer together and they come home and say, hey, I made some new friends. They're Palestinian or Israeli. And all we did in the summer was play soccer and have a great time. So that's what a lot of these organizations do. Then if you go on to the next slide, no matter what it is and what type of work you do, whether it's in sports or in something else, I think there's a number of keys to succeeding, to making whatever your passion is actually your story and your career. So if you go to the next slide. So one of them is definitely, and you probably will have experienced this at school as well, is the quality of the work you deliver. In my view and in my experience, if you always strive to deliver excellence, it's hard to really go wrong, and you will have success in whatever it is you do. Try and become really, really good at what you do, maybe even the best. And then that will speak for itself, and success will come with it. Also, of course, try to play to your own strengths. What do you really like? What are you really good in? Well, that could be something you work on. Also, develop your weaknesses. Maybe they can become strengths for you to work in. And then, of course, don't hesitate to ask for help. Let others help you, support you in areas you might be weaker in. Reputation, as I said before, building bridges, not burning them. Any industry you work in, any business you decide to work in, it's actually pretty small. The world seems like it's big, but it's pretty small. And word gets around, that person was really good, was really nice, delivered really good work, and was really pleasant to be around. So that's something you could always do. Resilience is definitely, whatever you're doing, hang in there. You might not succeed at first, or you might succeed and then you'll have setbacks. And so just hang in there. Go for it and hang in there. And the last thing, courage. Like I said before, sometimes you just have to go for it. I didn't know, could I do this? Could I do this for a living? Will this work? Will they want me? Will they accept me? Just try, just go for it. And worst thing you could do is you might stick that Harvard rejection letter up on the wall in the senior dining room along with all the other rejection letters. And that shows you got rejected, but maybe at the same time you got into a few other things besides the one you got rejected from. All right, if you go on. Next slide. So, going to the conclusion, go on. My passion, obviously, growing up was always sports. It still is. I don't play rugby anymore. My doctor says that after 5 knee surgeries, that's not advisable. I still love skiing. I'm from Austria, so that's kind of mandatory. It's in our blood. I do ski. I still do a lot of different sports. If you go to the next slide, I'm lucky to have been able to turn my passion of sports as a hobby into a career. I get to travel around the world, work with amazing people in different countries and different cultures. I always say it's the people that make the games in the Olympics. That's what we say. The Olympics, without the people, there wouldn't be any Olympics. Without athletes, well, there certainly wouldn't be any Olympics. Without fans, without the organizers, without the volunteers, there wouldn't be any Olympics. It's always the people that make the games. And I love meeting people in summer before last, I was in Tokyo for the Olympics. I worked with a team of Japanese, and we had a Japanese team of volunteers, and it's amazing. It's really fun. Now I live in France. I was lucky to have learned enough French at TASIS, where I took it all the way through the AP level. That's now allowing me to work in French language, but also in the French culture. And I have some colleagues who travel around the world who find it really difficult to assimilate to different cultures and to work with people of different cultures. But for us, TASIS kids, ex-TASIS kids, that's just a Monday, really. That's just what we do all the time. That's life at TASIS, and that's a huge gift and something we are all given through TASIS, and that we will keep for the rest of our lives. One nice story why I put that a real job for a real life is, of course, the joke is that I never had a real job. It is a real job. I do have to get up, earn money, and things like that, but I'm lucky to do it in something I love. And when we work, for example, at the Olympics or other events where I was working with volunteers, and they take a couple weeks off from their normal activities to work with us at the Olympics. They might be students, they might be grown-ups who have normal jobs, and some of them are retired. And so I always try to take some time when we're having a conference meeting to ask them, so what do you do in real life? And they'll tell me their story, and it's always really interesting. Some of them are studying whatever it is they're studying. Some of them might be a lawyer, might be a doctor, whatever their job is. Some of them are retired. And then they ask me, what do you do in real life? And I say, well, this is my real life. So I consider myself really lucky to be doing as a job what other people consider kind of a time out, a special moment taken away from their real job or their real life. And so, yeah, just that's the biggest advice I can give you. And I can't even say I wish somebody had given it to me when I was at TASIS, because they did. Someone did. Mr. Leon Maggio, who was a teacher when I was at TASIS, he did give an advice to us, the student assembly, to follow your passion, which at that time I couldn't figure out exactly what it means and what it was, but I somehow got there eventually. So whether you know it now what it is, whether you don't, it doesn't matter. There's many ways to kind of get there. I think the most important thing is to just develop your interests, develop your passions, and see where they can lead you. And I think that might be the last slide. If you go, yeah. So I'm here if you have any questions.
First of all, can we give Miss Mühlhofer a major round of applause?